My name is Ethan Brooks, and I am 50 years old, living in a quiet, snow-heavy town in Minnesota where neighbors know the brand of your snow shovel and family matters are discussed more often than the weather. Out here, silence has weight, and gossip moves slower than the wind but lasts longer. It's a place that teaches you endurance, and endurance became the defining word of my life long before I understood why. 16 years ago, I married Linda. She was warm in the way northern women often are, practical warmth, the kind that doesn't melt snow but makes you believe it will. With her came her daughter, Megan. She was 9 then, small for her age, with a sharpness in her eyes that told me she had already learned how to measure trust. Her biological father, Rick, appeared rarely, beautiful in theory like the northern lights, yet practically useless. He floated through birthdays and holidays like a visiting saint, dazzling in his brief appearances, but gone before the dishes were cleared. When I entered their lives, I told myself I would never compete with that kind of magic. I didn't have Rick's easy charm or his expensive laugh. I was steady, deliberate, a man who believed in the quiet work of building something that lasted. I wasn't there to replace anyone. I simply became the kind of man who shows up, tuning her bike brakes, patching the cracked wall in her room, sitting in the bleachers during her school recitals even when my shift ended 2 hours late. I never demanded affection. I just showed up until my presence became part of the furniture of her life. That was my way of saying love. Parent without a title. Years passed like that, predictably, almost peacefully. When Megan turned 16, I taught her to drive in the frozen church parking lot. She was nervous, jerking the wheel every time the tires slid on ice, and I kept my voice calm even when my heart jumped. Steady hands, I told her. The road listens to calm. I remember how she smiled when she managed her first smooth turn. For a brief second, she looked at me with pride, the kind of pride children usually reserve for their fathers. That single glance kept me going for years. Later, when she went off to college, I drove the U-Haul while Linda cried softly beside me. Megan sat in the passenger seat of her own car, waving through the mirror. I unloaded boxes into her dorm room, fixed the loose leg on her desk, made the macaroni and cheese she always requested when she came home. It wasn't fatherhood in the traditional sense, but it was something close, the version that asks for nothing in return but the quiet satisfaction of knowing you were there. I watched her become a woman, graduate, start a career. We shared fewer words, but the affection remained steady, anchored in shared history rather than sentiment. When she got engaged at 25, she thanked me for being the constant, for never missing a recital, a crisis, or a call for help. I believed her. I thought maybe, finally, constancy had a name. That night, when she called me Dad in front of Linda, it didn't sound forced or performative. It sounded earned. So when the wedding plans began, I offered what I'd always offered: support. I paid the deposits. The rustic barn near Minneapolis, the catering company, the string quartet, even the marshmallow roasting station she had dreamed about since she was a teenager. I signed every contract in my name, not out of pride but out of habit. Showing up, even financially, had become my language of love. Linda told me I was being generous. I told her generosity was cheaper than absence. What I didn't say, what I never said, was that part of me wanted to give Megan one perfect day, a day untouched by the fractures of blended family life. But cracks have a way of appearing even in the most carefully laid foundations. At first, they were small. Megan became vague about the final guest list. "We're still deciding," she'd say whenever I asked. "Tyler's family is big. We might have to shift some seats around." I didn't think much of it then. You learn, as a stepfather, to expect adjustment, to accept that you will always be part of the second draft of family plans. Still, something began to feel off. A coworker at the hardware store showed me an Instagram story from the groom's brother. It was a photo of the rehearsal dinner captioned, "Only the real family at the head table tonight." He meant it as a joke, I'm sure, but the words clung to me. I laughed politely, told myself it was harmless, but something cold moved in my chest. That night, I mentioned it to Linda. She frowned, told me not to read too much into things. But the way she avoided my eyes told me she already knew more than she wanted to admit. A week later, while helping Megan finalize her vendor list, I saw a seating chart lying on her kitchen counter. I wasn't snooping. I was just straightening up, trying to be useful. My eyes caught my name, Ethan, printed neatly in black ink. Next to it, a thin gray line ran through the middle. Not erased, just crossed out. Someone had penciled in Rick Brooks above it. The way silence feels heavier than anger. I didn't say a word. I simply stood there, looking at that paper as if it were a mirror showing me what I had refused to see for years. That love without acknowledgement eventually becomes servitude. That evening, I went home early. Linda noticed the change in my voice, asked if everything was all right. I told her I was tired. She didn't press. Maybe she didn't want to know. Maybe she already did. In the days that followed, the world outside went on. Snow melting into the gutters, the smell of pine and damp wood filling the air. But something inside me stayed frozen. Every small conversation felt rehearsed, every laugh brittle. When I offered to help with last-minute planning, Megan said, "Tyler's family's handling most of it now, but thank you." It was the politest form of exile I'd ever heard. I went back to my garage that night and sat among the smell of oil and dust. My hands still bore the faint scars of every project I'd done for her. The bookshelves, the dresser, the wooden jewelry box I built for her 16th birthday. All those things that once meant belonging now looked like evidence in a quiet trial against myself. I thought about the years, the endless giving, the patience, the hope that one day she'd see not the man who filled the gaps but the man who chose to stay. I realized then that I'd spent half my life proving I was worthy of a seat at a table that would always have my name written in pencil. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being thanked but never truly included. It's the loneliness of the reliable, the man everyone depends on but no one introduces properly. I had been her constant, yes, but I had never been her center. And maybe that was my fault. Loving too quietly, giving too much room to people who never thought to offer any back. That night, I went upstairs, kissed Linda goodnight, and stared at the ceiling for a long time. The snow was falling again, soft against the window. I thought about that seating chart, that thin line through my name, and I realized something with a calm so deep it scared me. You can give someone everything: time, money, patience, love, but if they decide your place in their story is temporary, there's no amount of devotion that can rewrite the ending. The confrontation didn't come as a blow. It arrived like a draft slipping under a closed door, subtle, chilling, inevitable. It was late February when we finally sat down in the living room. The kind of evening when snow falls sideways and the house feels smaller for it. Megan and Tyler had come over to talk. I already knew what the talk would be about, though no one said the words out loud yet. Linda had made tea. She set the cups down carefully, one by one, as if the ritual could hold the family together for another hour. Megan's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the hem of her sweater. Tyler looked composed, maybe rehearsed. He began. "We've been finalizing the ceremony," he said, voice too polite to be honest. "There's a tradition we want to respect. Megan's biological father walking her down the aisle. It just feels." He hesitated, searching for the word that would make betrayal sound noble. "Authentic," Megan finished. Linda shifted beside me, her fingers tightening around her cup. I stared at the steam curling up between us. The sound of the furnace kicking on filled the silence that followed. I didn't ask questions. I didn't demand justification. I simply nodded once. "I see." Megan's eyes flicked up, startled by my calm. "Ethan, it's not that you're not important." "I'm not," I interrupted gently. "Not in this moment. I understand." Tyler nodded quickly, grateful to escape conflict. "It's just, we don't want things to be awkward. You've done so much for Megan, and we really appreciate that." Appreciate. The word hit like ice water. Appreciation is what you give to volunteers and waiters, not to the man who raised you. I looked at Linda. Her lips were pressed tight, colorless. She wanted to speak but didn't. I realized then that her silence had stopped being a shield. It had become consent. When they left, the house exhaled. I sat on the couch, staring at the indentation where Megan had been sitting. Linda hovered by the doorway, waiting for me to say something. "She's nervous," she said finally. Weddings are complicated. They are, I agreed. But erasure is simple. Linda's eyes glistened. She doesn't mean to hurt you. Hurt requires intention, I said. This isn't cruelty. It's preference. That night, I went to my desk and opened the folder where I kept the wedding contracts, the barn venue, the caterer, the florist, the musicians, the photographer. Every payment, every deposit, every signature bore my name. My name, the one that had been crossed out on the seating chart. I didn't rush. I sat for a long while watching the snow fall through the window. Each flake vanished as it touched the glass, leaving no trace. It seemed fitting. That was me, visible for a second, then gone. Then I started making calls. The barn first. A cheerful woman answered, apologetic when I explained I needed to cancel the booking. Oh, that's unfortunate, she said. Was there an issue? No issue, I said. Just clarity. By midnight, the venue was released, the decorator notified, the caterer refunded. The marshmallow station, Megan's favorite idea, gone with a single email. The string quartet's deposit returned to my account within the hour. Each cancellation felt like cutting a rope that had been wrapped around my chest for years. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation, a quiet retrieval of my own worth. The next morning, Linda found me at the kitchen table with my coffee and a neat stack of confirmation emails. What did you do? She asked, voice brittle. I honored their wishes, I said. They want authenticity. Let them have it. Her face drained of color. You can't just cancel everything. The wedding's in 2 weeks. I can, I said, sliding one of the invoices toward her. Because my name is on every line that matters. She stared at the paper, as if the printed words were a wee asterisk p asterisk n she didn't know how to hold. This isn't you, she whispered. I almost laughed. It's exactly me, the man who always fixes things. Only this time, I'm fixing myself. She sank into the chair across from me, tears beginning to gather. They'll never forgive you. They already forgot me. The phone started ringing before noon. Megan first, then Tyler, then even Rick, the absentee father who hadn't shown up for anything but now found his voice when the money stopped flowing. Megan's messages came one after another, her words frantic and uneven. Please, Ethan, this isn't fair. Tyler's family can't cover everything. We'll fix the seating chart, I promise. Just please don't ruin this. Ruin. That was the word she chose. Not help, not save. Ruin. As if I were breaking something that hadn't already been broken by her own hand. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I finally understood that silence has a weight equal to all the words that had ever been used against me. By evening, Linda's voice was raw from pleading. Please, Ethan. She's panicking. Rick disappeared again. Some sudden work trip to Alaska. Tyler's family can't make up the difference. The barn won't rebook on such short notice. I looked at her, calm. Then maybe this will teach them the difference between having a father and having a financier. Her expression hardened. You're being cruel. No, I said softly. I'm being accurate. That night, I sat by the window, watching headlights move through the snow. The world looked cleaner than it had in years. For the first time, I wasn't carrying anyone else's illusions. In the morning, news started spreading through the small town faster than the plows could clear the roads. The barn wedding collapse, someone called it online. People whispered in grocery stores, piecing together half-truths about financial troubles or scheduling mix-ups. No one mentioned betrayal. That part was invisible the way pain usually is. Megan sent one final message late that evening. You've destroyed everything we worked for. I typed a response, then deleted it. Instead, I stood in the quiet of the kitchen, hands steady around a glass of water, and said the words out loud to the empty room. Everything you worked for? The echo didn't answer. Linda cried that night, small and silent, the way people cry when they realize they've been complicit in their own undoing. I didn't comfort her. Compassion, like money, runs out when spent without gratitude. Over the next 24 hours, I watched the structure collapse. Vendors pulled out. The venue rebooked. Guests were notified of changes. Rick's work trip extended indefinitely. Tyler's parents scrambled to host a last-minute gathering at their home, offering a backyard, a few string lights, and cheap folding chairs. It was all happening without me, and for once I felt peace. A strange, heavy peace that doesn't glow or sing, but settles deep inside the chest like closure. I walked through the house late that night. The walls were quiet, the air still. I paused at the staircase, looking up toward the dark hallway where Megan's laughter used to echo years ago. It struck me that this was the truest version of family I had ever known: silence, absence, and the echo of what could have been if love had been measured not by blood but by presence. Outside, the snow fell steadily, each flake dissolving on the cold earth before another replaced it. I stood by the window and whispered, not in bitterness but in weary acceptance, "You can't erase what was never written in ink." And just like that, the storm inside me went quiet. The wedding day arrived like a test no one had studied for. I didn't go. I spent that Saturday splitting wood behind the house, the sound of each swing echoing through the trees like punctuation. The air was cold enough to sting, but clean, the kind of cold that makes you feel awake. By mid-morning, my phone began to vibrate. Texts, voicemails, calls. I let them pile up. The screen lit with names: Megan, Linda, unknown numbers that were likely Tyler's family. I didn't need to hear what they'd say. Regret has a tone you can recognize even in silence. Later, a friend from town sent me a message. Heard the wedding moved to the groom's parents' place. Looks rough, man. Attached was a photo. A gravel parking lot. A few tents, folding chairs sinking slightly into the mud. People bundled in jackets, clutching paper cups. In the background, I could see a makeshift arch leaning to one side, draped in wilted fabric. No music, no lights, just overcast sky and obligation. Rick didn't show up. Of course he didn't. He'd been a ghost long before he was ever called father. Megan had built a life around believing he might someday appear solid. I used to envy her faith in him. Now I pitied it. Linda went. She had to. She said as much before leaving that morning, standing by the door in a blue coat I'd bought her 3 Christmases ago. Her voice trembled, but not from cold. "I have to be there for her," she said. "I know," I replied. "Just remember who wasn't." The house felt larger when she left. Empty but honest. For years, every corner of it had carried someone else's expectations. That day, it carried only mine, and silence. Evening came slowly, gray dissolving into black. I made dinner for one, simple and hot. The phone still buzzed every few minutes, like a dying animal that refused to rest. I turned it off, set it face down. Some moments don't deserve to be witnessed in real time. When Linda returned past midnight, her eyes were swollen, makeup smudged like bruises. She didn't speak at first, just stood in the doorway, the cold still clinging to her coat. "How was it?" I asked quietly. She hesitated, then sank into the nearest chair. "It was sad," she said. "Sad. Like watching a dream get rewritten halfway through." The sound system kept cutting out. The arch collapsed twice. People were arguing about food. Rick's side didn't even show up. Just empty chairs where his family was supposed to sit. Megan tried to smile through it, but it looked forced. Everyone kept pretending things were fine, but you could feel it. I nodded. Sometimes pretending is all people have left. Linda wiped her face with the back of her hand. I thought I could fix it by being there. But the whole time, I kept thinking, this didn't have to happen. "No," I said. "It did." She looked up, confused. "It had to happen," I said again. "Because people only learn what they break when they finally have to sweep it up themselves." Her shoulders shook. "You could have gone, Ethan. I wasn't invited." "That's not true." "It is," I said. "When someone crosses your name out, it's not an accident. It's instruction." We didn't talk for a while after that. She went upstairs, her footsteps uneven. I stayed at the table, tracing the rim of my glass until the light outside turned from blue to black. The next morning, the town had already begged *N its quiet post-mortem. At the gas station, the cashier asked if I'd heard what happened. How the heater failed halfway through the vows. how the cake melted in its box, how the bride cried during the toasts. I nodded, said little. In small towns, silence is its own form of confession. Days passed. The house carried the echo of tension. Not open anger, just the dull hum of two people trying to live beside something broken. Linda moved carefully, her voice softer, her presence cautious, like she was afraid to wake a sleeping dog. A week later, she sat across from me after dinner. "I didn't defend you," she said finally. "Not once. When Megan asked me to talk you out of canceling, I tried, but not because I thought you were wrong. I was just scared of what would happen if you were right." Her honesty caught me off guard. For years, she'd been fluent in avoidance. Hearing her speak the truth sounded foreign, beautiful and terrible all at once. "What are you afraid of now?" I asked. "That you won't forgive me." I set down my fork. "I'm not sure forgiveness is the point anymore." She nodded, eyes wet. "Then what is?" "Understanding. And boundaries. We built a life on one and ignored the other." That conversation didn't fix anything, but it opened something. Over the next few days, she stopped pretending. We spoke like two people rebuilding from the ashes instead of standing in denial of the fire. It wasn't love's rebirth, not yet, but it was truth's arrival. 2 months later, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, there was a knock at the door. I almost didn't answer. When I did, Megan was standing there, small against the snowlight, holding a cardboard box. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, as if the floor might give way. The box trembled in her hands. "I brought some things," she said. Inside were pieces of a life we'd once shared. Photos from school recitals, drawings from her childhood, a wooden jewelry box I'd built her, the one she'd painted with sunflowers at 16. "I didn't know what else to do," she whispered. "Tyler moved out. He's been distant. I think I just wanted something solid again." I didn't say anything. Words, after a certain point, start to feel like background noise. She took a breath. "I hurt you. I know that. I thought I could build something new without looking back. But all I did was tear down what was holding me up." Her eyes met mine then, full of the kind of sorrow that doesn't ask for forgiveness, only acknowledgement. "I'm not asking for money," she said quickly, almost embarrassed, "or help. I just wanted you to know I see it now. Everything you did. All the years. All the quiet ways you stayed." I nodded. "That's enough." She hesitated, then placed the box on the table. "I don't know if I can fix it," she said. "You can't," I replied. "But you can start again. That's different." A small, shaky smile crossed her face. "I'd like to." We stood there in silence for a long time. The air felt heavy but cleaner, like the moment after a storm when the sky hasn't yet remembered how to be blue. When she left, I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated, just tired. The kind of tired that means you've carried something too long and finally set it down. That night, Linda came to me in the kitchen. "She's trying," she said. "So am I," I answered. We didn't touch, but the distance between us felt smaller. In the weeks that followed, Megan began calling once a week, sometimes twice. No requests, no obligations, just conversation. She talked about work, about moving into a smaller apartment, about learning to live within her means. I listened. I didn't offer advice unless asked. Sometimes the best form of love is restraint. The last time we spoke, she said something that stayed with me. "You were right, Ethan. You can't buy family. You can only build it. And I think I'm ready to start building again." When the call ended, I sat by the window for a long time, watching the first flakes of spring snow fall. They melted as they touched the ground, brief, fragile, temporary. But still, they fell. Maybe that was enough. In the months that followed the failed wedding, life didn't so much return to normal as it learned to live without pretense. The silence that once filled the house no longer felt accusatory. It was cleaner, simpler, a silence earned rather than imposed. Linda and I moved like cautious survivors in a landscape we'd burned ourselves. We spoke less, but when we did, the words mattered. There were no more small lies meant to preserve comfort. Comfort had already proven useless. Megan began calling every Tuesday. Always Tuesdays. She'd start with nervous laughter, like someone testing the temperature of water before stepping in. "How was your week?" she'd ask. "Still splitting wood out back?" I'd tell her yes, and she'd laugh again, a little more easily each time. At first, the calls were short. 10 minutes, maybe 15. Then longer. She talked about work, about Tyler, who had left 2 months after the wedding, citing different visions. There was no bitterness in her voice when she said it, just quiet acceptance. I didn't gloat. I didn't remind her I'd seen it coming. I simply listened. Sometimes presence, not prophecy, is the greater kindness. She started asking for advice. Not money, not help. Just words, small things about bills, car repairs, recipes. It was strange at first, being asked instead of assumed. I realized that for most of her life, my love had been invisible because it had been effortless. Now she was beginning to see the cost of what had once seemed infinite. Linda noticed the change too. One night, after Megan's call, she said softly, "You sound lighter when you talk to her." "Maybe because she's finally listening," I said. Linda nodded, her expression unreadable. "You've waited a long time for that." "I stopped waiting," I replied. "That's why it came." The real revenge, I learned, wasn't in the canceled contracts or the humiliation of a parking lot wedding. Those were temporary ripples. The true revenge was quieter, colder, more enduring, the act of reclaiming self-respect in a world that had mistaken it for weakness. For years, I'd poured myself into that family like water into a cracked glass. Every act of giving leaked away before it could fill anyone. But when I stopped, when I let the glass stay empty, they finally saw the shape of what had been holding them. I remember one particular Tuesday in late summer. The air was thick with humidity, the kind that clings to your skin like guilt. Megan called just after sunset. Her voice was steady but small. "Dad?" she said. The word froze me for a moment. It had been months since I'd heard it spoken that way, not as a placeholder, not as politeness, but as truth. "I wanted to tell you something," she continued. "I got a promotion. Small, but it's something. I know it's not what you used to want for me, but it's mine. I earned it. That's all I ever wanted," I said. "For you to build something you could stand on." There was a pause. "I wish I'd understood that sooner." "Understanding comes late," I told her. "That's how you know it's real." After that, she spoke about taking evening walks alone, about learning to cook for herself. It wasn't the kind of conversation that glowed with sentiment, but it carried weight. The steady rhythm of a bridge being rebuilt, plank by plank, without ceremony. When the call ended, I sat for a while in the dark. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at her, not at Linda, not even at Rick, the man who had built a mythology out of absence. Some debts, when left unpaid long enough, lose their power. Rick reappeared briefly that fall. Not in person, he wouldn't risk that, but in stories. Megan mentioned that he'd texted her, apologizing for missing the wedding, claiming flight delays, promising to visit soon. She didn't sound hopeful. She sounded tired. "That's who he is," I said gently. "I know," she replied. "I just needed to hear you say it out loud." That was the closest thing to absolution either of us would ever get. Meanwhile, Linda and I were finding our own version of balance. Not love renewed, not yet, but a cautious respect that hadn't existed before. We cooked dinner together again, small meals eaten in silence, the kind that doesn't ache anymore. She apologized once, truly apologized, for years of silence that had cost us both so much. I accepted it not because it erased anything, but because it acknowledged everything. The winter came early that year. Heavy snow, the kind that muffles sound until even your thoughts feel distant. One morning, while clearing the driveway, I found myself thinking about all the weddings I'd helped pay for over the years. Friends, relatives, people whose faces I barely remembered. How easily money can make us believe we're part of something. How quietly it erases us once spent. That was the lesson, I suppose. Money buys moments, not meaning. And meaning, when given freely to people who don't recognize it, turns to ash in your hands. In December, a letter arrived in the mail. A real letter, handwriting I recognized instantly. Megan's. The envelope was pale blue, the kind sold in stationery sets for people who still believe in words that travel slowly. Inside was a card, simple and unadorned. No photo, no glitter, just ink pressed into paper. Thank you for stopping me before I lost myself completely. Thank you for letting me fall, and for not cushioning it with your wallet. You taught me that love isn't about giving everything. It's about giving wisely. You'll always be my father, not because you had to be, but because you chose to be. She signed it simply, your daughter, Megan. I read it twice, then a third time. Each sentence felt like a small exhale from the past 16 years. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just sat there, holding the paper like proof that quiet endurance can sometimes echo louder than any grand gesture. I placed the card in my desk drawer beside the canceled wedding contracts, relics of both destruction and repair. The two belonged together. One ended an illusion. The other began a truth. As for Linda and me, we never returned to what we were, but maybe we weren't meant to. Some relationships survive not by rekindling love, but by learning not to mistake silence for peace. We share space, warmth, history, and now honesty. It's enough. Sometimes, when I walk past the old barn that almost held a wedding, I stop for a moment. The field around it is empty now, just snow and silence. I imagine the lights that never hung, the music that never played, the vows that never reached the air. And then I think of Megan's card, tucked safely at home, and I realize the ceremony wasn't canceled. It just happened somewhere else, quietly between truth and consequence. The real revenge, in the end, was peace. Not the kind born of victory, but of release. Because sometimes the greatest power a man can claim is the moment he stops asking to be seen, and finally sees himself instead.